We are in love with Japan. Teo Torriatte, Let Us Cling Together. Next on Crown Jewels. Project Crown Jewels. I'm your host, PLD, and this is the podcast where I take you on a journey through every song in the Queen catalog and the solo catalog. We listen to all the versions. We figure out what the Crown Jewel version is, the best version, as we create our ultimate playlist. I also try to give you a little bit of notes, quotes, and let's just see where it falls on my ranking. Does it hit my top 10 Queen/Queen related songs of all time? Now, as far as listening to versions go, well, a lot of songs have different versions. That's what, especially in the Queen universe, there's the album version, there's a single version, there's a live version, there's an edited version, there's a remix version, there's a demo version. Which one is the best version? Now, in order to listen to this, well, I don't want to get struck. So what I'm going to do is in the description, I put listings and links for YouTube videos of all the versions that are available so that we can listen to them. So when we get to that point into the podcast, we'll pause the podcast. You can go listen, you can come back, and we'll have a conversation about it. Well, I'll have a conversation with myself and you'll listen. Teo Torriatte, written by Brian May, featuring Freddie Mercury on lead and backing vocals, Brian May on guitars, piano, harmonium, plastic piano, and backing vocals, John Deacon on bass guitar, Roger Taylor on drums, tambourine, and backing vocals. Now, a harmonium is also called a reed organ or a pump organ. Basically, it makes it sound a lot like an organ, but it's made through blowing air through reeds. Basically, those reeds are tuned at different pitches and different notes. You can be foot pumped or it can be hand pumped. I never knew what a harmonium was until Queen. So educational, the band is. Very educational. As far as plastic piano goes, well, Brian actually has a quote where he talks a little bit about that. 1976, he talked to Capital Radio and said, "We have some good Japanese friends. Our interpreter, when we were in Japan, called Chika, helped me with the words when we were there. That was one of the few things we actually did get done on tour. She taught me how to pronounce the words. I just wrote the English and she translated it roughly, and we worked on it until it sounded right. A plastic piano is a very strange little keyboard. It's my Bud's Vox, actually, which they lent us. I was fiddling around, on and from that. From fiddling around, it came the basic idea of the verse for that song. When we came to record it, it was very difficult, and you can just hear it on the track beneath the ordinary piano sounding extremely plastic." Also, Brian had a quote from 2017 in the book Queen in 3D, talking about Japan specifically. And Japan was so intense and emotional for us, it was very hard to leave. We grew completely attached to our Japanese team of interpreters and security. By the time we said goodbye to them to get on the plane back home, we were all emotional wrecks. You know, that's never changed. Every time we've been back to Japan, we feel this way. I wrote the song Teo Torriatte about the strong bond we as Queen felt with the Japanese people. My lovely interpreter, Chika Kujigoroka, worked with me on translating half the choruses into Japanese. I think I never thanked her enough. And at some point when we go back, we always sing a version of this song. And our fans, now a whole new generation, sing it with us gently and perfectly in tune. Now, if you remember the Tie Your Mother Down episode that began a day at the races, you remember they had the MC Escher-like intro that Brian played, the rising staircase, kind of played over and over. It felt like it was going up, but it was really kind of staying at the same level before it goes into Tie Your Mother Down. Well, the end of Teo Torriatte, the album versions do contain an outro, very similar to kind of bookend it, the piece. And that's the difference really between the album version and the single versions, as we are about to find out. The band did play this live, like Brian said in his quote, pretty much every time they went to Japan, not every single concert, but oftentimes they would play at least a snippet of it, sometimes a fuller version. And that continued on with Queen and Paul Rodgers, as well as Queen and Adam Lambert to this day. I mean, Queen and Adam Lambert have a Japanese tour coming up soon. I would guarantee that this song will be amongst the set list. So let us now take a listen and figure out which one of these versions is the Crown Jewel version. We're going to start off with the album version. Like I said below, or before rather, about below, in the description, you'll find a YouTube link for the album version of Teo Torriatte, Let Us Cling Together. Pause now, click on that link, and come back and we'll talk about it. Well, there you go. You can hear that plastic piano right underneath right from the beginning, like ding, ding, ding. It's like a toy piano or something. It adds such an interesting texture. I never really knew what it was until I read the quote and then listened for it. But it does add, like I said, a nice texture to it. Freddie's voice, so beautiful. I love Freddie's voice in this. It's very crisp, very sharp, and I don't mean tonally. I mean like just cutting, cutting, beautiful, powerful, especially when we get to the bridge, which we'll get to in a second. And some great lyrics from Brian as well. Brian, a wonderful lyricist when it comes to these like straightforward, powerful love songs. He's really good at getting what he means across in a way that is universal. And I mean that you can all, it's not, doesn't have to be very specific. It's kind of like a vague enough that you can all kind of feel yourself in the song, see yourself in the lyrics, interpret them your own way. He's very good at doing that, making it a very universal song. I love that. John's bass getting that second verse there, delightful, delightful. He does this all the time. Every time I listen to a new Queen song, when you use John as a building block, you usually have the kind of basic first verse or basic intro, and you let John kind of do his thing, where he kind of slides up and down the fret, adds this like moving bass line, adds such a wonderful piece of texture to the song. It keeps things interesting, keeps things fresh. You never want to hear the same thing twice exactly, so you kind of have the second time through, add that little wandering bass. John's a little minstrel wandering up and down that bass fret. We get the drum roll into the chorus, which is Freddie singing alone, maybe double tracking himself. Before we get to the second chorus, we repeat the chorus with the Japanese lyrics, adding some of those Brian harmonies down below underneath Freddie. Really supportive there. Now the next verse, we get to feature some atmospheric guitar bits, I like to call them. It's definitely Brian and guitar. It kind of sounds not like a rolling thunderstorm. It kind of sounds like a thick layer of water that kind of covers the track in a way. It doesn't like bury anything, but just adds this kind of like tonal wah to it. That kind of just, again, little different sounds, different ways kind of make you hear that. You're going to make them hear 3, 4, 5 verses the same way. We're going to change things up just a little bit to make it more interesting as we go along. And this time we skip the English chorus, go right back into the Japanese chorus with even more harmonies, even more of those harmonies. And then finally get to that bridge, which I talked about, my favorite section by far of the song, Brian's power bridge. Boom, boom, boom. Bah, when I'm gone. Crunchy guitar chorus. Freddie at his best. A lot of Brian harmonies and a lot of Brian ahs in the background as he goes up and down, giving Freddie some great support to go off to the stratosphere with. Really, really super powerful. And we jump back into the English chorus again with a full chorus. Now, it's not credited. Like I said before, I didn't give any credit to any other backing vocalist. Freddie did say at one point there's about 6 of them in there, non-credited, who's saying the choir part. It almost sounds a little children-esque, but very, very cool. Ends with the piano ending, like with some guitar orchestration, kind of having that little like fade out to we get to that MS Escher, like I said before, or MS MC Escher. Like I said before, the ending is just like the beginning of the album, the ever rising staircase as we fade out until the end of the track. All right, next up on our list would be the single version, but I'm not going to have you listen to it. It is in the description below if you'd like to. I will be ranking it. The reason why we're not going to listen to it is kind of a waste of time to really listen to it after we just listen to the album version, because the only difference between the album version and the single version is they chop off that outro. So if you want more of a standalone version without the extended outro from the Day at the Races album, this is what you get. And quite frankly, a little spoiler alert, I probably would use this version in a ultimate playlist of sorts. If I'm listening to the album, I want the album version with the big intro and everything else. I'm listening to a playlist. I probably want more of a standalone version because it's not really part of the song. It's almost like a separate piece. It's just on the same track, so to speak. So that's why we're not going to listen to the single version. It is below. We'll instead jump to the high def version. Now, I'm also going to jump ahead right now and say that the high def edit is similar to the single. Basically, the high definition mix is a remix done by Brian May in 2005 for a compilation called Jules 2, also in Japan, 2008's Envision. Brian May did this new mix, which is very crystal clear. It's like the same song. There's nothing different about it, but the mix is so clear and you can hear so many background elements. I can't help but want to actually put it to the test. So let's listen to that one now. To jump ahead, the high def edit, which is done on a promo single, is basically the single version. It's basically what the single version does to the album version. This one does the high def edit, does the high def mix. It just takes out that instrumental outro. So we're not going to listen to that one either, but that one is also down below if you'd like to hear it. So without further ado, let's go listen to the high definition mix from 2005 of Teo Torriatte. It's like watching a Blu-ray versus watching a VHS tape. It's very crystal clear. You can hear guitar parts, backing vocal parts. The whole song is like a revelation of how it sounds. You're getting much more in depth, much more picking apart of what track goes where. I really wish they would do high def mix just for the entire catalog, quite honestly, because it's such a beautiful version. I do love that. But not much specifically to talk about. It's just the whole thing. The same thing I talked about before, just crystal clear, more crystal clear, I should say. All right. Next up, we have in the listen below, I have a reel-to-reel alternative take, and it says no YT. That's because I don't have it, and YouTube doesn't have it. I actually have never heard this full version, so I'm going to take it out of my rankings, but I wanted to acknowledge its existence. Now, there is a version out there to some collectors. It's called the Alternative Take, featured from a Wessex Sound Studios reel-to-reel tape. It was an alternative tape from 10-inch Wessex reel-to-reel master tape, and it featured different background vocals that don't appear on the final cut. That's according to Queen Vault. I have never heard it, so I don't know. I have heard about 48 seconds of it, though. I got a snippet from somewhere, and I can hear some different background vocals, especially during the choir parts and the chorus parts towards the end of the track, because that's kind of the 48 seconds that I got. But it's really not fair for me to put this in any kind of ranking or even develop it any further, because I can't let you listen to it, and I can't, I mean, there's no reason to. I only know I have 48 seconds. But I wanted to acknowledge it does exist. Maybe someday we'll get this alternate take on some kind of deluxe version of Day at the Races. I don't know. Maybe someday. Maybe never. I don't know. But I definitely wanted to at least acknowledge its existence. All right, we're going to move on to the live versions now. As we usually do this, I don't go through time. I go through officially released versions first. So therefore, there was no officially released version from Freddie from Freddie era Queen. Some VHS tapes, but nothing that ever releases an album. So we're going to jump forward first, the Queen and Paul Rogers era. Then we'll do the Queen and Adam Lambert era. And we'll come back and do the Freddie era and the Brian solo era. But first up, from Japan in 2005, it was released in Japan as Super Live in Japan. And this is Queen and Paul Rogers doing Teo Torriatte. So look in the description below, click on that YouTube link, and come back and we'll talk about it. Brian May, lead vocals on that one. Queen and Paul Rogers live at Saitama Super Arena, October 27th, 2005. At the advent of the Queen Plus era, Brian really made his home on the second stage during the second act of these concerts, and he'd perform acoustically. Always Love of My Life, quite often 39. And he'd also do some other songs here and there. Roger would come down, they'd throw some things in there. In this particular time, in this particular venue, in this tour, he performed Teo Torriatte as part of this set. But it was really a set that was meant to drive back to the full band version, as you see. It started off with Brian just by himself on acoustic guitar and himself on lead vocals, even using a falsetto that Freddie doesn't even like to use quite often live, as you're going to hear in a little bit. We do feature Spike Edney on the backing keyboards, including that plasticky sounding piano. Jamie Moses, who played a second guitar on this tour. That's one thing that they really did differently during the Queen and Paul Rogers era. Jamie Moses from the Brian May Band supported Brian by playing a second electric guitar, letting Brian do a lot of different things. When the Queen Adam Lambert era showed up, they cut that out, and Brian's the only guitarist again. And you also have Jenny Miranda playing the bass. Now, the bass stuff that comes in for the chorus alongside some more spike strings, which are not really present in the main song. But for the second chorus, the best part about this version, and really all of it, is Roger, because Roger's voice isn't very distinctive on the studio version. I don't know if he sang very much. I know usually on songs written by Brian, Brian would dominate the background vocals. Songs written by Roger, Roger dominates the background vocals. They might all three sing, but sometimes one of them would kind of be more dominant. In this case, Roger was less dominant on Teo Torriatte, except for when he was live. When they're live, you really hear Roger. It sounded like a duet between Brian and Roger, quite frankly, which I love. I mean, as like you're a Queen fan, I love the Queen and Paul Rogers era. I love the Queen and Adam Lambert era. It's great seeing the boys live. But anytime I can get a pure Brian and Roger together, that's going to make me happy. I do think the other background, like Spike and everybody, are singing background vocals as well, but it really feels like it's Brian and Roger are the main two voices you hear. Now, in the third verse, Brian actually takes off the acoustic guitar. And if you watch the video, you'll see that Brian was actually singing with a lead vocal, like a mic in hand, which is not something he used to do very often, or doesn't do very often. He doesn't like singing without his guitar. He's not comfortable doing it. He likes having the guitar in hand, something to do with his hands. He also often tends to just kind of use his hands to do weird things as he's trying to sing live. That's his own words, not mine. I don't mind it. It just definitely looks a little awkward at times. But he lets it go off, picks the acoustic guitar off, and Jimmy Moses provides those kind of storm-like guitar tones that I mentioned before for the studio version. Ryder starts playing some atmospheric cymbals. Then we get into the Torriatte chorus again. Roger coming in again, crystal clear. The best part about this part is when the bridge comes. Paul Rodgers walks down, and Brian finishes out just before the bridge. Then Paul takes over for the bridge while Brian grabs the electric guitar, grabs the old lady, the red special, and starts really crunching down on it. And Paul has a great bridge. He sings it differently than Freddie does. He has a different phrasing, which makes him go up at the end instead of for always. Instead of for always, it was for always. It was up. A very different take than Freddie, but definitely a very valid take. I actually really appreciate it. Really like it as an alternative. Very good. And then we have the ending is now a full band ending. Paul on lead vocals, Brian and Roger doing the backing vocals with everybody else. Roger going super higher on harmonies. They really come out crystal clear. God, I love Roger's backing vocals. They really are the secret sauce to Queen for me. Maybe I might be crazy. Maybe you don't see it the same way, but Roger's backing vocals really do a lot for me. And then again, we end the song with Brian on the red special instead of the piano. It's a very nice version. I really do appreciate it. It's really kind of a well thought out, well arranged, great for the live setting, bring that quiet acoustic version into the full band version to get us into the final act of the show, or the third act of the show. So there we go. All right, coming up next, let's look at what they do when Adam Lambert came to town. When Adam Lambert live in Japan in 2014. The link is below. Come back for more.
No need to wonder if I ever think of you.
All righty, much like Queen and Paul Rodgers at the beginning, it's just Brian and an acoustic guitar. It seemed that by the time the Adam Lambert era started, they tried to expand in some ways, but simplify in others. You'll find that the band tended to do more medleys, tended to do more snippets, trying to fit in as many songs as possible. And I feel like they wanted to do this song, but they didn't want to do the full-on version. In fact, Brian did this version before Love of My Life. So instead of transitioning into the end, this is transitioning into the acoustic, which is why you don't get the full band version. It's Brian and guitar. Yes, you hear Spike on some keys. You do hear the bass playing in the background, Neil Fairclough. But no more vocals. It's just Brian's voice. That's it. Except for when the chorus comes in, especially the Japanese sung chorus, he lets the audience sing that part while Brian actually sings his own harmonies. So it's like the audience is Freddie and the Brian is his own harmony, which is nice. It's kind of an emotional bit. I do enjoy it. It's definitely so far simpler than the other versions. It's not the full song. He only does the beginning part and then ends after the second chorus. So that's all there is to it. All right, let's go on to the Freddie era stuff. A couple of versions to listen to there. They are both down below. Tokyo 1979, Sapporo 1982. Listen to them both and come back. We'll talk about more. All right, those are two live versions from Queen, 1979 in Nippon Budokan, Tokyo, Japan, April 25th, 1979. And then in Sapporo, Japan, October 29th, 1982. Brian does play piano on both. The piano sounds a little more real in 79, I feel, because in 82 and again 84, it got into a little bit too heavy into the synthesizer sound for my tastes. I do like some of their playing. The synthesized sounds are a little bit much. They ruin songs such as Now I'm Here, as far as I'm concerned. It doesn't really ruin the song here at all, but that's the difference in the piano. You can tell Freddie doesn't like using his falsetto, like Brian did in the Queen Plus era. Freddie tends to go down, instead of going be not gone up, he'll go be not gone down, which is fine. John is much more straightforward. I'm not sure the reason why. I can only speculate. And maybe John playing all over the fret might be a little bit distracting or something to that effect. We were trying to have a tight band sound. I don't know. That's completely pure speculation from someone who's not in a band. So, take that as it were. Freddie definitely gets more involved with the audience. It's obviously he's a song written specifically for that Japanese audience, so why not? Um, and the 79 version doesn't have any backing vocals from the band, I noticed. Roger and Brian really don't sing. It's really Freddie and the audience. But most interesting to me is they don't do the bridge section. They kind of end the song early in 1979, which is unfortunate. My favorite part of the song. You're going to cut it off right before you go? Come on now. But in 1982, they do, and the backing vocals are there in full effect, which is powerful. Freddie barks it a little bit. Obviously, his voice isn't quite at peak level during this tour, at this part of the tour at least. He definitely has to bark a few of those notes out there, but it is still very emotional and very powerful. You know, your miles may vary on that. Some people prefer the more emotional live version versus the more pristine studio version. I don't know. Your miles may vary. Okay, the last one we're going to do is Brian May on his own. The Brian May Band, in support of the Back to the Light tour in 1992, also would do Teo Torriatte in Japan and some other random places like Dusseldorf and Birmingham. I'm not sure why it's there, but that's okay. I mean, want to get a little, expand his horizons. Hell, I'd like to see them do Teo Torriatte in Boston when I go to get to see them soon. But in this case, the one I'm going to have you listen to, I initially wanted to give you Dusseldorf because there's a video attached to it, but it's not great quality. The video is not even great quality. So I decided to instead highlight Live in Osaka from November 8th, 1993. This is a full concert that was on the interwebs, on the YouTubes, from Brian May Band Live in Osaka, but I queued it up right to Teo Torriatte. So you can hear Brian's probably his best version. Dusseldorf, at least a better version than Dusseldorf for sure. Dusseldorf, if you got the lyrics a few times, he doesn't quite go for it a few times. I think the Live in Osaka is a superior performance. So let's go listen to that, come back, and we'll talk about it. There you have it. Brian actually does this whole first part without his guitar in hand at all. So like I mentioned before, Brian has a hard time with his hands. He doesn't have a guitar to hold on to. But he plays lead. He just does lead vocals, while the background Spike at the end still on piano. Jimmy Moses from Queen and Paul Rogers back in this day. He's on guitar. Neil Murray, you might know him from Whitesnake, amongst other things. Deep Purple. He plays the bass. Cozy Powell, of course, a late great Cozy Powell on drums, who really was Brian's musical soulmate after Freddie passed, before Brian got back together with Roger and Queen full on in the 2000s. Cozy Powell and him really forged a wonderful friendship until Cozy, unfortunately, untimely passed in car accidents right before a tour with Brian. It was really kind of a sad moment. But he's on drums here. We got Catherine Porter and Shelley Preston on backing vocals. It's a powerful version, this one is. It's definitely much better than the Dusseldorf version. Brian does get his guitar back during the bridge section. Of course, the quality of these versions are not the greatest compared to the officially released live versions, obviously, which does have some impact on where I rank them. But it is cool hearing Brian's emotional version here. Brian goes for those notes a few times. He really kind of stretches his vocal cords out. Some people don't like it because it sounds a little pinched, maybe. I feel the emotion. I like it. I like it a lot. So it's a very cool version, a very full version, as compared to like the Queen and Adam Lambert era version, for example, or even the Queen in 1979 Tokyo version. This is Brian May at his fullest. So it's a great version as far as I'm concerned. Well, now it's time to rank the versions and to figure out which is the crown jewel. We are ranking all 9 versions. Remember, we took the reel-to-reel version out because I can't rank that. All right, we have the album version, the single version, the high-def version, high-def edit, the Live in Japan, Super Live in Japan from Queen and Paul Rogers, the Live in Japan 2014 from Queen and Adam Lambert, Live in Tokyo 1979, the unreleased bootleg Queen version, Live in Sapporo 1982, the unreleased bootleg version from Queen, and of course the bootleg from Live in Osaka 1993, Brian May Band. All right, without further ado, let's get right to it. My least favorite of these versions, I almost feel sacrilegious saying it. My least favorite version is probably the Queen Live in Tokyo 1979. It hurts me having a Freddie version last. That's tough. But at the same time, partially it's the quality. It's not officially released version. Partially they don't even do the bridge, so it's a truncated version. And it is no backing vocal, so it's like a full version, but not a full version. It feels like they're just dipping their toes in. And it's not that it's a bad version. I can listen to it fine. but there's a better Queen bootleg version. There's a better, and all other ones have either a fuller version or there's a moment in there I really like. Uh, I hate doing it, but my least favorite is going to be that Queen Live in Tokyo 1979. Okay, next up, Live in Japan 2014, Queen Adam Lambert. Again, this is nothing to do with Paul and Adam. Adam doesn't even sing on this song. It's just Brian. But again, it's a truncated version. I want, if I'm going to listen to the best version of Teo Torriatte, I'm going to listen to a full version that at least has like the bridge and everything else. I don't count the outro. You can cut the outro. That's almost like I said, a different song. But this part, it's just Brian on acoustic guitar for the most part. Not even the full song, more of a snippet version. That's why it's going to be where it is. I do like it a little bit more than Tokyo because it is officially released. It does have a better sound quality. And when the crowd really sings that second verse, that second chorus, while Brian sings his own harmony, it's kind of a touching moment. It has to do with the emotions of the moment, obviously, with Freddie's passing and Queen still being around so many years later. That's why it's just a snippet of an edge over 1979. All right, next up, Live in Osaka 1993, the Brian May version. Again, this one actually really comes down to quality. It's not the best quality version out there. There's not very many good quality versions of Brian May's live efforts, especially these songs. He did release a Brixton album, Live at Brixton 1993, which we're going to get to. And that's great, but Teo Torriatte was not on that album. So unfortunately, we're left with what we have. It at least is the full version of the song. It does feature some great guitar work, some great vocals from Brian. But at the end of the day, there's just other ones I like better. From there, Live in Sapporo 1982. This is the other Queen bootleg version, Freddie version. But again, it's just the quality is not the greatest. You don't hear that crisp clearness of all the instruments next to each other. It's like listening to the high def version, then listening to this. It's muddy as anything. And you know, it is what it is. What can you do? At least this version is the full version. It is a Freddie version. Freddie's singing his heart out, even when he's not at his best. I'll take that. I'll take that any day of the week. But it's not quite high enough up there for me. Next up, Queen and Paul Rogers version. Oh, that hurts. Putting the Queen and Paul Rogers version over the Freddie live versions. Again, it's about, this is an officially released live version. So this has a crystal clear sound, and I'm a sucker for Roger Taylor's backing vocals, and they come through crystal clear here. Which is why I have this overall, the Queen bootleg versions and the Brian bootleg, and even the Queen Adam Lambert version. Some great vocals from Roger, some great vocals from Paul as well. I got to give credit where credit's due. Paul does the bridge very, very well. It's a rocking version. I like the build from the acoustic into the full band version. So that is what it is. So we're left with, well, all four of these is kind of a weird thing to do, because you got the album version, single version, high def version, the high def edit. I mean, quite frankly, you basically got the album version and the high def version. The single versions of the edit. It's the same, it's almost the same thing at this point. Really, one half dozen the other. So without further ado, I'm just going to make this really quick. Of course, you heard me. I like the high def versions. The high def versions are amazing sounding. They're crystal clear sounding. I love them so much. So give me the high def versions anytime. And in this case, as far as a playlist goes, I'm going to want the one without the extended outro, which really isn't a part of the song. It's a separate song. I don't count as part of the song. So from my least to my favorite, it'll be the album version, the single version, the high def version. Finally, my crown jewel, the high def edit, which is on Spotify for you listeners for the ultimate playlist. It is released on the Queen Day at the Races deluxe version, released in 2011. It is on Spotify. So that will be our crown jewel. Teo Torriatte, Let Us Cling Together, the high def edit version. All right, now we are going to see, does this slide into my top 10 Queen songs of all time? What do I give this on a scale of 1 to 11? Because we always crank things up to 11 here on PLD Project. Well, I do love this version, this song. I love this song quite a bit. So I'm going to give it a 10.5, which means it might just fall on my rankings. Let's take a look. All of my rankings are from 11 down 10.5. My top 10, you got to get a 10.5 or higher to get into my top 10 at this point. I'm only in 1976. Okay, I'm a shell. I know it. I get it. Stop. Let me know what you think. And it does slide into my top 10. It's going to kick Lily of the Valley from Sheer Heart Attack album out. It's going to push Love of My Life down. It's right. I actually prefer this to Love of My Life. It's going to push down You Take My Breath Away. I prefer this to You Take My Breath Away. But that's where it's going to slide in right now, the number 8 slot, right underneath the Millionaire Waltz. Right there, 3 Day at the Races tracks in a row. And let's see, yeah, that's 4 out of the top 10 are from Day at the Races. So you got Somebody to Love at that number 1 version, the Montreal version, number 1 in my heart. But yeah, that's where we are with that. That's going to do it, folks, for this week. Next week, we're going to have a quicker one. It's going to be about the live concerts in support of Day at the Races. We have a couple things to talk about, a couple of tracks that they played that aren't from albums. We'll have to really introduce into our expanded playlist. And of course, then after that, we get into News of the World, which is a very, very awesome album, a very classic album. Of course, everyone knows We Will Rock You, We Are the Champions. Those are the 2 big stalwarts. But those are really just the tip of the iceberg, my friends. Tip of the iceberg. Wait till you get some of the ones towards the end. One of my favorite songs of all time is on that album, and I can't wait to get there. I'm going to have to for now. Well, if this is your first time here, click that like, click that subscribe. Let me know what you think. Leave comments. If you're listening to an audio, please rate us. Rate us 5 stars. Again, leave us comments. Really help out the channel. If you want to help out even further, patreon.com/PLD Projects. Really appreciate everything you guys do. I have a great crew in store with people like Austin Goodell, Jeremiah Morris, Matthew Kearns, Freddie Buckingham, and Jeff Alterman, amongst many others. Really help me keep the lights on. I couldn't do it without you. Mwah, really appreciate you guys. But that's going to do it for us this week. Stay tuned next week. Keep yourself alive. As always, God.